Hello there. They call me Mr. E. Now, I thought that neoliberalism was just an economic explanation for the ruthless, corporatized world in which we live, and some loosely applied economic tricks that influence government decisions. But it's more than that. Much more dark and insidious than I could ever have imagined. Neoliberalism is no more an economic theory than it is just a license to redistribute the wealth of the world into the hands of the uber rich. It has created little but devastation. Sold to the world as the only solution to economic problems, we swallowed it, and now the forces of globalization have crushed us all under increasing extreme waves of inescapable debt. We are the slaves of this neoliberal nightmare. Have I got your attention? Good. Let's find out why.
My name is Mr. E. For reasons unknown, I have been thrown back into the past almost 100 years, and this is my story.
Now, neoliberalism has its derivations from the Mont Pelerin Society, formed in 1947 by a group of economists, historians and philosophers, which sought to protect capitalist global hegemony, which they saw as under attack by anti-capitalist movements. They feared the end of capitalism would be the end of free society and Western civilization. Neoliberalism is a merger of classical liberal ideology only where it is compatible with the supremacy of the free market from neoclassical economics. Now let's be clear, neoliberalism was not a sound, infallible economic doctrine built by design to tackle the economic mechanics of the modern age. It was a fringe form of economic thinking, which up until the 1970s was considered by most economists to be not worthy of any real discussion. And this is where I think neoliberalism is, at its core, misunderstood. It was never meant to be an economic theory to solve the economic miseries of the world that has just unfortunately failed. It works perfectly and exactly how its thinkers intended, as a way to concentrate the power of economic elites as the absolute rulers of society. With its intentions established, neoliberalism needed to be disseminated across the world. This was to be done using the intellectual classes, using think tanks and business schools, funded by the business communities and business councils. This is a core ideal of neoliberalism. The only type of class solidarity that is acceptable is when the rich need to come together to promote their interests, and so they did, effectively, with their neoliberal schooled economists who spread like missionaries across the globe. But neoliberalism needed the right opportunity to really kick off. It couldn't simply be thrust upon the world. After the World Wars, working class solidarity and financial regulation had delivered the developed world much prosperity. It wasn't until the 1970s, when these things conveniently started to fail, that developed nations began looking for alternatives to their economic management. And lo and behold, in comes the saviour in waiting, neoliberalism. Now let's look at what it means in practice then. Keep in mind its selling point. Make the rich richer and we all benefit. Now, if you want to understand what neoliberalism is, then you have to look at it from the viewpoint that it means different things in different places. It's different in a developed country than it is in a developing one. In developed countries, it was about deregulating existing financial markets, banks, resources and labour forces to allow free enterprise unrestricted access to maximise profit. The effect of deregulating labour forces is of particular concern because this is what helps stabilise wealth creation. It's living standards for working classes. It's maintaining a healthy middle class, signatures of prosperous society. Without this regulation, corporations were able to outsource and fire entire workforces for cheap labour overseas, ending secure employment. It also involved privatising public services and infrastructure to allow unrestricted access to businesses seeking profit. This is everything from healthcare, welfare, education, to public transport, water, electricity. Nothing is out of bounds for market competition. In developing countries, it meant turning them over by dispossession. Struggling nations would be given loans and fed foreign money to help develop, and then would be held to ransom to repay debts at a moment's notice, knowing full well they couldn't. Corporations and world trade bodies would then extract a nation's resources and labour power in order to repay debts, displacing local populations from their only means of prosperity. Financially coerced into action, governments would be deployed by neoliberal foreign influence to use force if necessary to quell local resistance and claim previously unmarketable goods to turn them over to foreign investment. A theme that is current in both is austerity measures. In order to address fiscal problems, nations worldwide were convinced that they had to suffer massive public spending cuts as public services just can't be afforded. This reinforced privatisation of public assets and goods as the methods to pay off national debts and to allow the private sector to do things more efficiently. The great irony, though, if you think about it objectively, is that neoliberalism has done nothing to fix global debt. If anything, it has made it unimaginably worse. Neoliberalism is all about the free market, the type of freedom that maximizes free enterprise, not free market competition that sees, businesses come and go based on their merits. It protects corporate interests and profits even when they fail. Think of the rhetoric, too big to fail, or bailouts. These things are completely antithetical to the meaning of free market. Neoliberalism promotes, creates, and protects monopolies. International conglomerates use their power to corner markets, price gouge, and hold and collect information for their sole advantage. None of this makes sense in a free market economy. The most disturbing thing about neoliberalism is that it's really a form of neo-colonialism. No longer is it nations with colonies, but it's international conglomerates that take over countries with debt traps and hold them to ransom, privatise all value, and funnel wealth back to tax havens and stock exchanges. All nations, in one way or another, pay tribute to corporate overlords, and when they don't, governments, like pieces on a chessboard, are instructed to deploy armies and militarized police forces to protect private interests and profits. Neoliberalism was a silent revolution, the corporate takeover of the entire planet. As a student of revolution, I must admit I am impressed. It did what it intended. It restored true power to our rulers, our economic elites. Now let me just say this. Neoliberalists don't like democracy and local action. They got their stranglehold on the world through lobbying governments and overwhelming legal systems. And these institutions can be won back by real people. Now, if you thought this was interesting, please give it a like and a share. And please, subscribe for more. There is much to learn about the revolution. Remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.